I'm just gonna come out and say it. Astro is my current obsession with healing, and I'm absolutely loving it in Dawntrail right now. Out the gate though, I should say yes, Astro's funny numbers for damage are currently leading all of the healers on FF logs. This is true, however that doesn't factor into my decision at all, and that what I'm going to talk about here is really more of the feel of Astro rather than its direct numerical efficacy, because frankly I would still enjoy Astro even if its funny numbers were the lowest of the healers. Let's start by talking about the astroflow system. Oh, wait, I'm not supposed to say astroflow, I mean the card system. So I finally come to my own personal conclusion about this, which obviously people may disagree, but I actually really like the card system in its current rendition. Is it perfect? No, but you know what, we got card diversity back, and I have found every single card an efficient use for it, and I have been quite impressed actually with the utility that I bring. There's a lot of funny effects, like the card that amplifies healing. Obviously if you're paired up with a scholar, that makes their like crit low spread barrier even bigger. Just funny little interactions like that make me happy, even though that card really isn't a slouch on its own considering how much healing is genuinely going into tanks. It will get mileage. But I want to talk about how the 2-minute burst window on Astrologian feels incredibly unique, and it feels really good, especially compared to the other healers. Like Astro's buff window, ironically, instead of like funneling its own damage into things, is like you're trying to carry over that 60-second card window and get all the cards into there, like your damage buff for your melee DPS and your damage buff for your ranged and obviously your Lord of Crowns. And so you kind of need to bring back your instinct that, hey, button is pressed and I have these cards, and volley them out. Like you want to hold them and get both of those damage buffs under your divination window, and obviously with the rest of the party buffs. During M4S there is a cannons phase where you are obviously needing to mitigate, heal, don't chad your healer, don't be that asshole, and you are going to be also volleying out all these cards. You're going to pop light speed, you're going to be like bam, melee card to raise the melee DPS, obviously on Viper or whatever. Then you do Lord of Crowns, and then bam, you open up your next deck of cards, and then you throw it out onto the ranged physical, which is probably going to be Pictomancer 99% of the time. Did I say ranged physical? You know what I mean. Probably not the range physical, I'm sorry. But genuinely, like, doing Astro during that cannons phase feels so freaking chaotic, hectic, fast. It really is fun to me, because you're, like, reading the debuffs and you're trying to move and keep everyone alive at the same time. I love it. It hits really well. So the Astro 2-minute window, absolutely, with the current card system, feels incredibly rewarding. Like, you are resisting your own urge of, hey, I press a button throughout the cooldowns, and it definitely feels the most involved of any of the healers in my opinion. And people are definitely free to disagree with me, but to me, it feels the most involved. Now, just to wrap up the discussion of the cards, is that in Savage Raiding, there is going to be phases where the tank is absolutely eating it badonk-a-donk, and you really need to kind of baby them a lot, even when they're using mitigations. The Astro cards, even if the tank cards are quote-unquote boring, I have found putting the bowl and putting the EU on a tank feels really good. Like, you have Exaltation, then you have Celestial Intercession. Like, Astro, obviously White Mage has equivalents of those, but like the cards feel really good, really sleek to play, and I have gotten incredibly good mileage out of it. Obviously, do I always toss them on the tank? No. Could I? Probably, maybe, but genuinely speaking, the two tank cards I do find kind of like are thrown away, but when they are needed, they are so useful. Now I want to talk about HEXACAST, which is a awesome change. Like, this might be one of the most powerful healer changes we have ever seen in Final Fantasy XIV. So the legacy of this ability, for anyone who isn't familiar, is that light speed used to be 1 charge and every 90 seconds you could use it. The developers recently made it so that you get light speed back every 60 seconds, and now you get up to 2 charges of it. It feels so frigging good. It feels so incredibly good. I cannot emphasize how much I love this ability. One example where it's useful is it lowers your cast time on revive. That is going to help you keep bodies up. I mean, because like we do see a rise in Pictomancer usage, which doesn't bring a revive. Sometimes you really do not have Swift on either the healers, and you know what, you can pick that up, and that is a good feeling. Obviously, you can plan out the fight, kind of how Black Mage does with their triple cast, but instead of triple cast, you get HEXACAST, which is just, it's hilarious. It's like, it just feels really good. But you can plan out a fight, and then you can basically limit your downtime, and it feels so freaking rewarding, especially like if you combine it with neutral sect, which was always powerful. Lightspeed with neutral sect is far from a new topic, guys. Like, this is like very, very much not a new thing. It's like what we were doing this on E12S. Like, this is not a new thing, but it feels so damn good to have that extra charge. I absolutely adore this ability. The next thing that I'm going to say that I absolutely love about the Astro is its access to mitigation. So neutral sect has for all time kind of been Astro's access to get into barriers ever since they removed Nocturnal Sect, which I am still very sad about. I still think that Nocturnal Sect could have been reworked into Modern 14. Neutral Sect obviously still exists today. However, Neutral Sect now will give you access to Sun Sign, which is going to be a straight up 10% mitigation that lasts for 15 seconds. Now, intuitively, if there is a big burst of damage, you can obviously use Neutral Sect, apply Barrier, and then follow up with Sun Sign so you get Barrier plus that mitigation. Other thing is you pop Neutral Sect just for the 10% mitigation, and then you don't use a GCD to cast that barrier because you don't need it. But what I've found very interesting, especially when I'm with a barrier healer who might not be quite as comfortable, which is totally fair. I mean, a lot of people are brand new to like the Savage Raid tier, and I'm never going to put someone down for that. But it has been, hey, this first hit I'm going to mitigate with that Neutral Sect barrier, and then I'm going to follow up and not immediately use Sun Sign and save that Sun Sign 10% mitigation for a follow-up, because you do have up to 30 seconds, which is a significant portion of time. Like, considering some of the raid wides going out, 30 seconds is definitely a noticeable amount of time. Take EE2, for example, for M4S. If you pop Sun Sign right at the start of it, you're not going to have it for the end of it, where I've noticed that, generally speaking, people tend to be a little bit more tender there. So what we really have with Astro is this very interesting like choices that you can use, and I will always appreciate that. Now, on the same tune is that Astro obviously still has access to Collective Unconscious. No, that's not a new Dawntrail thing, but it is something that I very much appreciate. Basically, how my brain thinks about it is that like Collective Unconscious is Sacred Soil, but on doubled the cooldown, because Sacred Soil's cooldown is normally only 30 seconds, lasts 15 seconds. With Astro, the interesting thing about this ability is that the heal over time component is what is in that tiny dome, and will last longer. It does last longer, but you will be able to hit with the mitigation in like 30-yard radius, which is super good. And what I've noticed most of the time is that that mitigation component is really what makes the difference between like, hey, your range physical DPS and range magical DPS are down or not. And I really adore this ability. I don't remember when the QL was, but it feels like it was more recent, because I remember we needed to weave in Collective Unconscious very carefully, but now it seems to explicitly have like a 5-second duration, which I think is newer. I don't quite remember it doing explicitly 5 seconds before, but just having access to that every minute just feels unique. It feels great. I want to take a second to say in this video that by no means am I putting down White Mage with this, because I've often seen a lot of people talk about Astrologian and being like, oh my god, it has so many off GCDs for healing, so it clearly is healing more than White Mage for that reason. And I'm a little hesitant to fully agree with that, because the White Mage's Lily system completely revolves around the idea of, hey, I'm going to cast on the GCD spells, which are going to feed into the Blood Lily, blood for the Blood Lily, and then kaboom, you can save that big Blood Lily for that big burst window, and honestly, it can be a DPS gain, because basically you're grabbing all those GCDs that would be outside the burst window, grabbing them and plopping them into the burst window. So White Mage by no means is a slouch, even though the healing system where it recoups the damage is on the GCD. So that's not going to be something that you see me list as an Astro perk, because it's so blasé to me. It's kind of like the numbers thing. It's just like, balance be balance, and White Mage could be higher next patch, who knows. For me, most of my things are how it actually feels, and like the actual like class design. Like, one thing that I will be very vocal on, which I know some people will disagree with me on, which I think is the beauty of having different classes in this game, is I do genuinely, honestly believe that Astro's Macrocosmos is not as fun and not as effective as Lilybell from White Mage. In my experience, that has definitely been the case, because Macrocosmos will not continuously prop up HP for multi-hit. You need to be very careful with your timing, and you can undershoot it and get less healing out of it, or you can overshoot it and then like you end up with ranged being knocked out. And plus with Lilybell, that got pretty early on, last expansion, the change where you can pop the Lilybell early, you can still do a big pop burst healing. In fact, I'd argue that's actually an advantage of Lilybell, is that Macrocosmos requires you to already have that incoming damage, whereas Lilybell, in a truly weird, frantic situation, which I would not recommend, you can pop early for a burst of healing. And so I just wanted to add that, because I know that people will be like, didn't you just say that, like, all the healers are viable? And yeah, they are. They really are. Like, White Mage is definitely not a slouch. However, everything that I just talked about, Astro, has really made me, like, fall in love with it. Like, I am enjoying it a hell of a lot. Like, HEXACAST is the most obscene thing ever. The 2-minute windows feel great. The card system in general, I do really think is great. I'll end this video by talking about Earthly Star, which I think is a great ability, because it's like, does it necessarily make Astro more powerful than White Mage? I don't believe so at all. However, it is a ability that does reward planning with a little bit extra healing. It's only 180 potency of extra healing from 540 to 720. Ubu 720, but it's like that kind of thing makes Astro feel rewarding to me. I really actually think I'm loving Astro a little bit too much. I keep taking it into all my groups. It's like, hey, help me prog M4S. I'm like, oh, sweet. Pops in on Ast.